Hi everyone, and I think we're live. For those new here, my name is Nicki. I'm an author and editor, and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading, and all the other things I love. And it's the reading we're here for today. It is the last day of the month, and it's time to wrap up the books I've read during June, of which there are quite a few. So we will move straight along. The good news is I checked the last stream just from a second ago, and the tech all seemed to be working well with my new microphone and webcam, so hurrah. So I can continue this one without any worries about that. And let's kick straight off with the first book. So I read Slowness by Milan Kundera. This is one that I received way back from my birthday or Christmas back in December. Don't know when Christmas is anymore. And there's still a few from that period that I just haven't gotten to just because I've had so many NetGalley reads and other bits coming in. So I'm trying desperately to clear some of those December books because otherwise we'll be in December again and I'll have a whole new load and I won't have read all these. So anyway, after that little digression, Slowness. Slowness is the second to last book by Milan Kundera that I hadn't read yet. I've got one more to go. And it's a 5-star read for me. I really love Milan Kundera's work. This one is probably not one of my absolute favourites, but it's still really enjoyable. It's kind of a narrative of a romance romances in two time zones, and it's kind of a contemplation on the changes of modern life, and the slowness is the reflection on the fact that everything nowadays is moves so fast. Don't want to sort of give too much about the book away, but it's kind of a philosophical discussion, I guess, with these two romances as the background. If you're new to Kundera's work, I wouldn't recommend starting with this one. I'd go with one of them slightly more obvious ones like the Unbearable Lightness of Being, maybe The Joke. But if you're already a fan, then this is one you'd probably enjoy as well. Next up, I read a 2-story book. The 2 stories being Gigi and The Cat by Colette. Now, Gigi is a story I knew from the movie musical, from whenever that was, back in the late 50s, I think. Yes, I reckon late 50s. It's one of those stories that these days we find a little bit difficult because it's essentially about a teenager being groomed to be a courtesan. At its heart, that's what the story is around, which nowadays we have a bit more of a problem with than we did back when this was written. So it was interesting. So I was keen to see the source material that the movie was based on. However, I think the movie is actually better. I think it gives a bit more depth to their relationship than the book does. It's fairly short. I was surprised how short it was. And really, for me, that was a 3-star story. Whereas I really enjoyed the second story, The Cat, which was a little bit longer. And it's looking at this relationship between this newly married couple. However, the man's pet cat kind of comes between them, and it's a bit of a toss-up of whether he's going to pick the wife or the cat, which sounds a bit inane, but it was actually a really well-written, thoughtful story, and I really got into it and really engaged with the characters and the action taking place. I'm going to get rid of this banner now because it's just annoying me a little bit. There we go. So yeah, because of that, I upped the rating for the book overall to 4 stars. And another one from the distant past of December was After the Banquet by Mishima Yukio. I'm gradually working my way through Mishima's works. I discovered him probably about a year ago, or a year ago when I got this book, so a year and a half ago now, really. And I've read, 3 or 4 so far. I've loved all of them. This one's no exception. 5 stars from me. This one is about an independent woman. She's in her 50s, an older lady. She runs a restaurant. But one day, one of her customers proposes to her and she accepts him. And he decides to go into politics or return to politics. He was a sort of semi-retired politician. And she ends up throwing all her energy into his campaign. And it's kind of a look at politics and how much money plays a role in elections. While also looking at the relationship between these two characters who really were not compatible. And it's a really interesting emotional drama and a political warfare drama at the same time. Moving along, The Story of Kullervo by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this is a piece that Tolkien wrote. It's kind of based on part of the narrative from the Kalevala, the Finnish epic. And it's also kind of Tolkien's first attempt or early attempt at rewriting an existing myth in his own way. And it later led on to the character of Kullervo is essentially similar to the character of Tuin from his sort of Silmarillion, the early years of Middle-earth writings. It's a really interesting piece. Even more, again, with most of these books of Tolkien's where we're looking at sort of dissecting some of his unpublished works, the unpublished work itself is great, but what's more interesting is the notes and the sort of discussion and looking at how he crafted the story. And that's definitely the case in this one. I really enjoyed just seeing that process behind it more than anything else. And it was 5 stars for me. Next up, I've got my list here, and I had to kind of scan through and see which ones I've written June next to. So that's why you see me pausing in between a bit. Okay, so the next book I read was one that I got from someone at my work who was getting rid of it. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so please bear with me. Siddhartha by, or Siddhartha, I'm not sure how we say that, double D, by Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse, this is quite a famous piece I'd never read, and so I decided to give it a go. And I kind of went into it expecting it to be this really, really heavy-going slog of Indian philosophy, but it wasn't like that at all. It's actually quite an engaging story. The main character, the title character, he's going on this sort of journey of self-discovery, and it's about kind of getting rid of ego, I guess, and he tries in various ways to redefine his sense of self, I suppose. And it looks at various Indian sort of philosophies and folklore and myth along the way. It was a 4-star read for me. It was a lot more easygoing and enjoyable than I'd expected. And it's a book I'm really glad I read. It was very thought-provoking, but it's probably not one I'd rush to reread. Now, next up, I read The Symphonies by Andrei Bely. So this is a series of 5 works, and it's modernist Russian literature, symbolist literature, and it's quite weird, to say the least. I think the style, the structure of the piece is the strangest thing, and it took me a little while to get into that. It's almost written kind of like a bit of a prose poem. It's really hard to explain unless you see it on the page in front of you. I found it fascinating. I liked some of the sections, some of the stories more than others. But that's, part of the course for a sort of collection of separate pieces. But all of them have this kind of musical theme going on as well. It's one of those books where I'd say I'm glad I read it because it was completely interesting and strange and different, but it's not something I would rush to read it again and again. So again, it's a 4 stars for me, and it's just for the interest of it being so avant-garde and different more than anything else. Next up was a book I read that I received as an ARC. I forgot to say, sorry, apologies, that The Symphonies was one I got from NetGalley. And this next one, The Good Wife of Bath by Karen Brooks, I received as a print ARC from the publisher. So this is essentially, if you know your Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales, The Good Wife of Bath is a character in that. And this is a historical fiction piece of her kind of telling her own story, what really happened in her life and what the truth is behind what's in the Canterbury Tales. This was a good 4.5 star read for me. It was an enjoyable piece of historical fiction. There was some humor, there was some drama, and I really got behind the characters again in this piece. So even if you don't know the Canterbury Tales or are not that fussed about it, this book is still enjoyable in its own right. You do not have to have read the Canterbury Tales to read this book. You could just pick this book up and enjoy it, even if you know nothing about the Canterbury Tales. But if you do know the Canterbury Tales, then it will have that kind of extra level of interest for you. Next, I read another NetGalley book, Wendy Darling by A.C. Weiss, or A.C. Wise, I'm not sure how we're saying that. So this was a take on Peter Pan. It's a Peter Pan story told from Wendy's perspective. It's set in the future, so Wendy's now older and she has a daughter, and her daughter has just been stolen away by Peter, so Wendy returns to Neverland to retrieve her. And so we have the current action going on, but we also see Wendy's thoughts and feelings about what happened when she was in Neverland in the past. This is a very dark take on Neverland. It's a fairly sort of twisted drama in which Peter and Neverland itself do not come off looking very good. It's very much a feminist take on Neverland. Like, why did she have to go there and be a mother figure for them, and what was really going on behind all these games and the apparent fun. It was really fascinating. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really enjoyable. It sort of prompted a lot of questioning about the original story and was a really well thought out and interesting take on Peter Pan. Next up, another NetGalley read was The Peculiarities by David Liss. So this is a kind of alternate history fantasy piece, and it's set in a kind of a Victorian-esque London or early 20th century London. And we have these events, strange events that are taking place around the town, peculiarities like people giving birth to rabbits and these ghostly figures that attack women in the streets and various things. And we have our main character, who's a mild-mannered banker. He kind of doesn't really want to be involved in the bank, or it's kind of a family affair and he's been forced into it, but now he's into it. He wants to learn about it. And he starts trying to pursue some strange stuff that's been happening at the bank, which leads him to also investigate the peculiarities. A few historical characters join us along the way, like Alistair Crowley. And overall, it was an entertaining story. It moved at a good pace. And I really enjoyed the premise behind it. We're on to the last page, people. We are getting there. Still got a few to go, though. What have we got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 more. It's been a really busy reading month, I told you. So sticking with NetGalley still for the next few. Olav Audunsson, Book 2, Providence by Sigrid Undset. So I read Book 1 and really enjoyed it. I think I gave it about a 4 or 4.5 stars. It's a kind of historical medieval drama, family drama or saga, if you like. And this book picks up where the last one left off. However, this book for me was not as compelling as the first one, because whereas the first one there was a huge amount of action taking place, this one is more the main character, Olav, reflecting on that action. And he reflects and reflects and reflects. And there wasn't a huge amount of new stuff going on, which made it just a little bit plodding for me. And I kind of got to the end thinking, oh, is the rest of the series going to be like this? Because I think there's still a couple of books to go. However, I'm kind of hopeful that maybe now all that introspection has finished, that the third book, if I get an opportunity to read it, might pick things up again. So I'm not going to write off reading the third book. I might give it a try, but I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit more action-packed than this one. And really, you definitely wouldn't pick this book up unless you've read the first one. Next up, a complete change of pace. Pride and Paranormal by Adrienne Blake, or Adrienne Blake, however we're saying her first name. And this was a 3-star read for me. So as the title might suggest, this is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And it's set in a paranormal world. Izzy Bennet is a witch, and Darcy is a warlock. And they, of course, have misunderstandings and things along the way until they eventually get together. The reason this only got 3 stars for me is because it kind of felt like there were so many elements that kept being added in just for the sake of it. Like there was suddenly a dragon. What was that about? And also the fact that it does follow Pride and Prejudice, you kind of know what's going to happen essentially in the story throughout. And because of that, to make it work, you really need something compelling. And I just didn't get that compelling aspect to make me overlook the fact I already knew the story. So it was okay, and I believe there's going to be further retellings. I think she's planning to do a series of retellings in this style. So I wouldn't rule out reading another one, but for me, this was kind of just a middle of the road. It was okay, but I didn't love it. Sticking with NetGalley still, the manga artist's Copic marker colouring techniques. This had about 6 or 7 authors. What have I got written here? Shin Yu, Monperi, Kitamura, Koana, Kirasaki. This was a 4-star read for me. This book is really looking at techniques for using markers in colouring. It's looking essentially at Copic as a brand, but really most of the techniques they're suggesting would work equally well no matter what brand of marker you're using. Some of the stuff I had come across before in other books, but this one was very much focused just on colouring. So it went into a little bit more detail than some of those other books. And if you've already got plenty of books on manga drawing in terms of outlining and designing characters and things, this one might just be a nice addition to your collection just to look at colouring techniques, as well as just colouring faces and things. It looked at clothing, where to do different fabrics. It also looked at how to colour things like how to suggest rain and other natural bits and pieces in the environment like that. So it was very comprehensive, and if you're a manga drawer, it's worth taking a look at. Next up, still with NetGalley, I read The Piano, A History in 100 Pieces by Susan Tomes. So this is a non-fiction book looking at the history of the piano, the development of the piano as an instrument, and doing so through different pieces of music through different periods. This was a 4.5-star read for me. I thought it was a really interesting book. The only thing I would say about this book is I read it cover to cover. And I think I kind of, by the time I reached the 20th century and getting into jazz, I was a little bit over the analysis of musical pieces. I think it's probably a book that would pay off more if you picked it up here and there and just read 1 or 2 chapters or just about 1 or 2 pieces of music at a time, put it down and then came back to it later, rather than sitting and reading through, sorry, my nose is itchy, rather than sitting through and reading the entire thing all in one go. But nevertheless, it was really enjoyable, well-researched, an interesting piece. Still sticking with NetGalley for the next 2. So first off, The Easy Life in Kamasari by Miura Shion. So this is a Japanese piece, and it's about a boy who has been sent off by his parents to the countryside for a year, essentially. He's been lazing around after school, and not doing anything, and they ship him off to this middle of nowhere forest town where he has to adjust to life, and he's learning to be a logger, essentially. This was a 4-star read for me. I thought it was interesting in the way it portrayed sort of rural Japanese life and the ongoing prevalence of folk belief and things, and also looking at the forestry industry in Japan and various aspects of that. I did feel that the main character, we didn't really get we saw him sort of get used to the town, but we didn't really see a lot of his emotional backstory of how he felt about having been shipped off to this place, and that was kind of ignored. We focused only on his feelings while there. But nevertheless, it was an enjoyable read. And if you like Japanese contemporary literature, you should pick it up. And the next up was A Bargain of Blood and Gold by Kristen Jack. So this is gay romance, Paranormal. The main characters are a vampire and a vampire hunter. However, they have to band together to face a greater threat that's taking place in the town where the vampire's been living. So this was a 4-star read for me. I'm not going to say too much more and spoiler it. Essentially, it was an enjoyable paranormal tale. There was plenty of action. The romance, I thought, worked nicely. It didn't progress too fast. It wasn't too insta-love or anything like that. It moved at a good pace. So overall, just an enjoyable paranormal piece, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for. Next up, a couple of books I bought, which was Volume 6 of Vampire Night Memories by Hinamatsuri. So a manga. I really love the original Vampire Night, and so I have been reading Vampire Night Memories, which is kind of the sequel-ish series she's been writing. I like it, but I don't think it has quite the impact for me of the original Vampire Night. I'm going to carry on reading it, but there's part of me that hopes it's not going to be like 20 volumes long or something, but we'll see. We're up to 6 so far, and we'll see how it goes. It was kind of a 4-star read for me, essentially, both in terms of this volume and roughly the series as a whole so far. Another series I've been reading are the Bungo Stray Dogs light novels, and this was number 6, Beast. So it's written by Asagiri Kafka. I really enjoyed this one. It's apparently something that he wrote originally to give away for free to the first few people that saw the Dead Apple movie. And it's kind of been expanded and improved and released now as a light novel. And the premise of it is, what if the two of our characters had joined other agencies? So instead of being in the Port Mafia, Akutagawa is in the Armed Detective Agency. So I really enjoyed that. I thought it was fun to look at how things might have played out if roles had been reversed. And it's one you can just pick up. You don't have to have read all the light novels in order. The light novels generally in this series are standalone pieces. So you could just grab this one. It helps to know something about Bungo Stray Dogs, at least to have watched series 1, to understand all the sort of initial contact and how the story and characters took off, because that's what's being replayed in an alternate way here. Next up, going back to NetGalley now for the next 3. So first of all was Fang, Volume 1, by Bely. You kind of have to say that really fast. So this is a manga. It's about vampires. And in this society, vampires, to help prevent bloodlust and things, they end up pairing up with kind of a buddy who's there responsible for them. And there's often some sort of a relationship of a romantic or sexual nature involved in that pairing as well. And so we have our main character who's just been turned into a vampire, and at a kind of vampire meet and greet, he randomly announces that the guy who's been looking after him and sort of acclimatizing him to vampire life is his now partner. And which causes a bit of a stir, and they do eventually begin this relationship. This was a 3.5-star read for me. Look, the drawing was fine. I didn't absolutely fall in love with it, but it wasn't bad. And the story, I kind of felt similar. Like, I didn't dislike it, but the pacing felt a tiny bit slow. I kind of wanted a bit more action to happen. And I don't know whether in a second volume that might take off a bit more. But certainly for me, this first volume was 3.5 stars. Sticking with NetGalley for Bookbinding by Amy Spillman. This was a 4-star read for me. So this is non-fiction. It's talking about how to do your own bookbinding, whether it's making a little notebook for yourself or as gifts, or rebinding an older book that's damaged. And I particularly read this book because when I saw it on NetGalley, I've got this book of nursery rhymes from when I was a kid that I have with me here in Australia now. One of the things I brought over in the big shipment. And it really is, I loved it so much as a child. My mother had to read it to me so much that it's completely falling apart. And I've been saying for ages I should go and get it rebound. And I kind of thought maybe it's something I could do myself. But having read this book, I think I would just find a professional to do it, honestly. The book is really well written. The explanations are great. There's plenty of illustration to show you what the explanations are talking about and the instructions mean. And it kind of presents itself saying you can do this without much equipment. However, you do need some equipment, and it looks like a fairly time-consuming process as well. It doesn't look like something you can knock out in 10 minutes. And for me, I'm thinking by the time I bought all that equipment, I'm flat out enough in life as it is already. I'd probably have to dedicate half a day to trying to do it. I'd probably be better off like just paying a bit of money and getting someone to do it. But that said, the book itself was a 4-star for me. And if you're interested in bookbinding, if you think it's something you might like to take up, even if it's just for making your own notebooks or making some sort of quirky and fun gifts for friends at Christmas and things like that, then it's worth taking a look at. Because, as I said, it's well laid out, well instructed. It's just for the amount that I'd get out of it, I decided to go a different route with my bookbinding needs. That doesn't mean I won't give them a try in the future, though. Maybe if I ever have some free time, ever, I'll have a go at bookbinding and see what happens. But we'll have to wait and see on that. That'll be a project for maybe 10 years from now or something, the way I'm going. Anyway, moving on. I've got 2 left. Let's just wrap this one up. So first off, the final NetGalley read of the month, which I literally finished last night, is The Liquid Land by Rafaela Edelbauer. So I haven't even written up the review of this one yet. I'll be doing that in a short while after I finish these streamings. This one is a 4-star read for me. I haven't even written 4 stars in the book yet. That's how recently I finished it. This story is really strange in some ways. A young woman who's a physicist has just lost her parents in a car accident. And they came from this small town in Austria that no one's ever heard of, really. And their wishes were to be buried there when they died. So she sets off on this journey to try and locate this town, which doesn't appear on any maps, no one's ever heard of. And through a various series of events, she eventually finds herself there in Greater Ireland. And when she gets there, she discovers a rather strange setup. There's a countess who seems to be running the show. And there's various things going on in the town, including these sinkholes that are appearing that the town are trying to fix because their town's being essentially devoured into the earth. And as she ends up getting caught up in the affairs of the locals and staying there longer than intended, she gets involved in these plans and discovers there's possibly a fairly dark past that's linked to these sinkholes. So it's a kind of a weird, quirky, fantasy-esque, magical realism, maybe elements tale. Not full-on magical realism, because there's no like elves and dwarves, or there's nothing that strange going on, but there's just this sort of weird environment in the town that makes it feel like a kind of another world that isn't visible to outside people, if you see what I mean. And I don't want to say anything more than that, honestly, because I think it would spoil it. But if you just want something that's really quirky and out there and a bit different, then check out this book. And finally, First Person Singular by Murakami Haruki. So this is one I bought, and it's the latest collection of short stories by Murakami. It's a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed this collection. All the tales had something of interest. Some of my favourites were probably the title piece and Confessions of a Shinagar Monkey. They were really great. Of course, as with most Murakami pieces, you're going to have the issue of representation of women in the piece. That's kind of just a given with Murakami, and it kind of feels these days like you can't discuss it without his books without touching on that. But at the same time, I'm kind of of the view I just enjoy his books, and I'm just going to overlook his portrayal of women in them and the slightly misogynistic aspects that come through, and just enjoy them for what they are, which is what I've done with this book. If you're a Murakami fan, you'll definitely enjoy this. If you're new to his works, you could pick this one up as a first place. They're just little short stories, self-contained pieces, if you want to check out his style before tackling something like Kafka on the Shore. But overall, yeah, just enjoyable reads. I'm actually quite fond of Murakami's short stories. In some ways, I think I like them as much, if not more, than the novels, because they're just these like strange and quirky little pieces that you can just enjoy in sort of 20 minutes read. On that note, I think that brings me to the end pretty much. As we're halfway through the year, I guess I should just do a quick update on my challenges and things. So for my Goodreads challenge of 180 books for the year, I think I'm up to 95. So I'm well on track for that at the moment. All being well, I'll stay that way. And in terms of other challenges, so my own author challenge. Oh, well, let's talk about the World Reading Challenge first. So my World Reading, I can't even talk today. World Reading Challenge, yes, has been continuing. Now, this is one that I'm not particularly trying to finish this year or anything. It's just an ongoing challenge. And my aim is to gradually cross off more and more books over the years till I've read a book written by someone born in every country in the world. So far this year, I have crossed off another 5 countries. So I'm pretty happy with that. If I can squeeze in 1 or 2 more before the end of the year, that would be awesome. But even so, 5's good. And so for my own challenge, the NJM Book Challenge 2021, I have actually already covered 23 out of 25 of the categories. I'm still left with pre-1900 and Weather Word in the title. So pre-1900, I have books on my shelf that will, in my TBR pile, that will satisfy that criteria when I eventually get to them. So that one's not a problem. I have been struggling, though, with weather word in the title. When I selected that category, I thought it would be quite simple, but I just haven't yet come across any books that have a weather word in the title. But I've still got 6 months left to find one. At worst, if it gets to October and I haven't done one yet, I'll literally have to search one out. But hopefully something will turn up on NetGalley or in some other way from someone at work or something in the meantime with a weather word in the title. That will satisfy it. So we'll see. I'm sure I'll manage somehow to finish off these last 2 categories in the next 6 months. So that does bring me to the end of my wrap up. I will leave you there for now. I will just make a quick announcement that I have some plans to do some new vlogs. I'll probably do them as live streams. I'm not entirely sure yet. I'll see how we go. I'm planning to do one a month talking about my language learning. For those who don't know, I do learn a number of foreign languages, and I've recently taken on some more because I'm mental. So I've essentially got 8 foreign languages that I'm learning at different stages. I'm advanced with some, only beginner with others. And I'm just thinking about doing some vlogs. I'm going to do a few opening ones that just talk about language learning in general, some tips, some pitfalls, things like that. Then I'm going to just zoom in on each of my languages, the 8, and do a vlog on each of those, like when I started them, why I started them, how I'm getting on with them, what resources I use, and things like that. And then I'll probably wrap up with a few more general ones at the end for some sort of future plans and bits and pieces like that. So that's the plan. I've actually got 18 videos sort of plotted out. So I'm going to start them in mid-July, the first one. And if all goes well, I'll keep doing them around through to the end of 2022, I should say. So I do hope you'll come and join me for those. Just something extra as a bit of interest compared to my usual material. I'll also have, of course, my usual couple of vlogs that are pre-filmed and already scheduled on YouTube during July. And then I'll be back at the end of July with my film and TV and book wrap-ups as always. So I will close there for now. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye, everyone.